tonight I thought I would talk about a lot of the questions you guys asked me. I get tons and tons of questions in the comments, and I thought I would start by addressing a few of those because I was starting to get a lot of the same comments. So I thought I would just answer those questions right here. And if you guys have more questions, drop them in the chat because tonight I'm going to take a look at them. And just tell you a little bit about how I got to this gnosis and the things that I've learned on the way, things that I thought were a waste of time, things I thought were really, really healthy and good. And I know you guys have got a lot of questions about that. And if you have, I'm going to try to answer them here tonight. I don't really have a formulated thing that I'm going to talk about. I don't have notes or anything like that. I'm just going to kind of wing it here tonight. But yeah, I think you guys are going to enjoy it. So here we are. How did I get here? This is the biggest question. What are the things, a lot of things people want to know are, what were the path I took to get here? What were the things that got me to understand the things that I know? And also to clear up frustrations that some of you guys might have by not being able to see it yourself, or maybe some of you guys are on the path for a while and you're having difficulty seeing it. And I just want to say that, look, that's the path. That's just it. And for the longest time on this path, I did not see it. I was not able to see it. And there's still a lot that I'm not able to see, which is why I'm here. I'm working on stuff. But for the majority of it, it's a cumulative understanding. So you just get these little nuggets of understanding, like a straw of hay, and then eventually you build up this nice big haystack, and it all starts to come together. But as the pieces are coming in, it's kind of like when you first start putting together a puzzle. It's like it just seems very overwhelming, and it feels like you're never going to get it done, and you have no idea what the picture looks like that you're trying to make. And I get it. I know I make it look easy sitting in here, and I can assure you the path to get here was not easy. It can be easy, but the ego makes that a very difficult trick for us, because our attachment to the reality in front of our eyes, we take it in as real, and because we take it in as real, there's an attack there. There's a connection between you and the world out there, and that attachment is very, very hard to let go of. And this is a process of letting go. This is a process of stripping down to your true nakedness, the true you, without all the bullshit, without all the layers of stories. So ironically, I'm going to tell you how to get there through telling you my story, which, let me preface this by saying, it's complete bullshit, because I'm making it up right now. Not that it didn't happen to me. These experiences are very real, and I'm being very truthful in these stories that I tell you. But if we're really going to get down to the essence of what Zen is and non-dualism, the story doesn't exist. The story is going to come into existence the moment I start to speak it into existence. So take that with a grain of salt as I say these things. Maybe that made sense to you right now. Maybe it doesn't. But there will come a time in your gnosis where you'll be like, oh, that is why Ford prefaced it that way. So, yeah, so that's that. So, yeah, a lot of people assume that the success in music is what brought me to this place. Music had nothing to do with it. I mean, let's just say the music business had nothing to do with it, or very, very little to do with it. The only thing that the music really did for me is it provided the space, which I know is very, very hard for a lot of people out there. And I truly feel very, very blessed for being given that space. But the space is because after I started having a little bit of success in music, I was able to break away from the industry itself and go and become an entrepreneur, become independent, because it was very clear to me that I could make a lot more money if I was independent than if I was working for record companies. And as a producer, that's a really, really important thing. You know, producers, yeah, sometimes producers get points on records and make tons and tons and tons of money. That really wasn't the case for me in a lot of the cases. So kind of a work for hire kind of a thing. So you're kind of chasing your money. So yeah, it looks glitzy and glamorous, and yes, I made a very respectable income for a long time and still do, but it's the income is not what brought me here. If anything, the money and the toys and all of that stuff are distractions from you working on yourself. So just take it in from there. But the space that the music business provided for me is probably what helped me the most in through all of this. And this is something that you guys can kind of figure out on your own. And here's something I want to really, really stress to you. I'm going to tell you some of the things that worked for me, but this is not a set in stone path. Like, this is the path that's going to get you there. Everyone's path is different. Everyone's on their own unique journey, and the things that resonate with me may not resonate with you, and that's perfectly okay. And the important thing is that you do what's true to you. That's the most important aspect of this. Yes, it's going to reveal a truth to you, and that truth is going to be a singular truth that is true for every single person on this path. But your method to get there, your pathway to get there, is going to be different for every single person. And a lot of times people, when they're on this path, they can get very, very attached to their path and not realize it. I know a lot of teachers out there who will be saying things like, this is the path, this is the only path, yoga's the only way, or Christianity's the only way, or Allah's the only way, right? Everyone's got this is the only way. No, there are no only one ways to do anything. There's lots of ways to do it. I'm a huge fan of Alan Watts, who's a brilliant Zen teacher and philosopher. He's passed away now, but he was very, very popular in the 60s. And the way he says it, which I always loved, he says, yoga is just a method of union. The word yoga means union with the divine. That's really what it means. So just do your yoga. Whatever your yoga is, do that. That's the yoga you want to do. And you might say, well, what is my yoga? I don't know. It's the thing that lights you up. The thing that lights you up the most, that's your yoga. That thing that puts you into a state of going within, that's your yoga. That thing that makes your heart smile, that's your yoga. That thing that you do where you're just like, wow, I feel connected. I feel connected in a new way. That's your yoga. And that's going to be different for everybody. For some people, it might be jogging. For some people, it might be drugs. For some people, it might be meditation. For some people, it might be doing actual yoga. Do you. That's the best tip I can give you, is for you just to do you. And realize that this whole trip, this entire trip, the thing that you're going after, the thing that you're digging down to, is love, which sounds so ambiguous. Well, what does that mean? What does love mean? The kind of love that I'm talking about is authentic, unconditional love. And you can't get there. You ever heard that, you can't love somebody else until you learn how to love yourself? I cannot tell you enough how absolutely true that is. That is probably the most important true thing that anybody can tell you. And a lot of us, we live in a society that teaches us not to love ourselves, right? We're always comparing ourselves to other people. Oh, they took a private jet to this place, and this person bought the McLaren, and she has a house with 2 kids. Look how happy they are, right? We're constantly comparing ourselves to others. And we're using these cultural methods of measurement to decide what success is and what success looks like. But the things that culture claims as success are not necessarily success. And that's a very, very important thing to take out of this. Beyond success and wealth and money and status, getting in touch with your higher self is hands down the coolest, most amazing high that anybody can experience. It's the most life-changing, gift-giving fulfillment possible. And I think that anybody who has had even a glimpse of that will agree with me of the truth of what I just said there. So I say that so that you decide, make a decision right now that this is going to be your full-time job, that this is the job. The job is getting in touch with your higher self. That's your job. It's more important than work. It's more important than everything else that you think is important. All of that, as beautiful as it may be, is a distraction from this. So getting back to the love, it's unconditional love comes from loving yourself. It comes from completely accepting you as you are right now, without the feeling of, well, I kind of love myself, but I would love myself a lot more if I was 40 pounds lighter. Or I really like myself, but I would really like myself better if I was rich. Or I really like myself, but I wish I had a better job. Or I hate myself because I'm so stupid. Or what kind of self-talk do people give ourselves? I hate my life because this person treats me bad. Or I hate my life because I have to live in some Ohio or some kind of thing like that, right? No offense to anyone living in Ohio. I think Ohio's great. But that's what I'm getting at. You have to get past all of that. All that stuff you have to just, it's a self-acceptance. You have to realize what is beautiful and amazing about you. And part of that overcoming is falling in love with yourself in spite of the entire world telling you you shouldn't. And when you fall in love with yourself, it overflows. It's an indescribable feeling. The only word I can give you is that's complete fulfillment, which sounds very ambiguous for most of you. What does that even word mean? We're so far away from fulfillment that we don't even know what that word means. But that fulfillment comes from self-love. It comes from self-acceptance, self-worth, realizing your self-worth, and realizing that self-worth is automatic, but it grows with how great, how worthy you are, and how integral you are. That's where the worth comes from. You might be worthy, but if you have no integrity, it's a very low sense of self-worth. But if you have a high sense of integrity, you're going to realize that the integrity has more to do with building your own sense of self-worth than it does for pleasing other people. And that's a huge hurdle to get over in this path. For me, I had a lot of insecurities about being transgender. I was insecure about being fat, which is probably a result of the transgender thing. And a very, very miserable person. Even though I had success, even though I had hit records and all kinds of things like that, I was incredibly miserable. I had nothing. I didn't feel like I had anything. And I was constantly measuring myself to other people, to other people, my friends, to my circle, measuring myself to other producers and artists and all of that stuff. And it made me a very, very miserable person for a very, very long time. And I tried very hard for many years to cover that pain up with either diving into work and overworking so that I didn't have to think about how much I hurt, or buying things with the success to cover up the pain of not loving myself. And my life went on like that for many, 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 many years. Even after I experienced the ego death, which I'll get to, that I experienced in 2005, which is a joke in itself. But even after that, even though I had the final piece of the puzzle and I could see the truth, there was a part of me that refused to accept it, and a part of me that just mulled over that moment for years and years and years and years, until one day it just clicked. I can't explain it any more than that. Just one day it was, wow, oh my God, that's what it is. And as soon as that gnosis, that coming together of those 2 points happened, it was like a mini ego death in that space, but it wasn't scary this time. The first time it was terrifying. This time it was full of love and full of light and full of laughter. And from there is when things in my life really, really started to change. And that was really only a few years ago. That really wasn't that long ago. It was many, many, many years of being fully into awareness and self-realization and the Zen practices, and learning as much as I could about self-awareness. And I go to all the retreats and read all the books. And all that stuff was great. All that stuff led to my awakening. But a lot of that stuff was distraction too. So I thought first, I'm going to go through a few of the books that I thought were had the most profound effect on me. And I'm doing this because this is one of the most common questions. What books do I read? So I should preface this by saying, I'm going to tell you some books to read, but if you want to get through the essence of all these books very, very quickly, I wrote 2 books, and they distill this information down through my eyes, but I highly encourage you guys reading them on your own. So I'm going to say this in a couple of different parts. The first book that started to really shape things for me, as I said, I was an atheist for most of my adult life. So when I was about 30 years old, so about 20 years ago, I was an atheist, but you could say that there was searching there. I wasn't necessarily searching for the divine, but science and cosmology became my religion. I was so enamored with the wow factor of the complexity and elegance of the universe and all of its parts that became my God, so to speak. That was reading these kind of books, Carl Sagan and all these science books, Stephen Hawking. That had become my religion, and that remained for many, 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 many years. Even though I would say that I was sort of seeking at the time. May have not admitted I was seeking, but I was definitely seeking. So the first book that really got me to broaden my horizons a little bit and pause for a moment, and for the first time make me an agnostic, because I was hardcore atheist up to this point. But the becoming an agnostic came over reading these 2 books, which ironically are not about religion. These are both, the 2 books I'm going to talk about here are very, very wrapped in science in a big, big way. And only in the smallest part of these books does it kind of reveal a divine nature to things, which is the way it had to be, because if I had read that early on in the book, I would have just thrown the book in the trash. I would have been like, no, this is not for me, you know? So they had to get to me slowly. So the first book is this one here, and this is called The Mind of God by Paul Davies. Amazing, amazing book. And this book really got me to the point of it's an entire book about the cosmology and of the cosmos and all the intricacies of the cosmos. And in the last couple of chapters, it discusses the idea of a possible way to explain all these discrepancies with the science, which was the multiverse theory. It was the many worlds theory. And up until that point, I had never heard of the many worlds theory. This is the first book that introduced that idea to me. And when I first heard the idea of an infinite number of universes, that there's a different universe for every single decision that's made on Earth, that is a whole universe wrapped around that change, that one change. At first, I laughed. My mind was blown, and I just laughed at how preposterous an idea that was. And it took a long time for that to kind of sink in as a possibility, like months, maybe a year of just kind of going, wow, that's really, really interesting. And this book led me to another book, which a lot of my books I don't have here because I give them away. If I have a book that's really profound for me, I'll give it away to people and hope that they have the same experience. So I'm just going to kind of do this as much as I can. But The Search for Schrodinger's Cat is another book that I really, really, really enjoyed. The Search for Schrodinger's. And this gets into multiverse theory very, very heavily, and the many worlds theory. So gets into all that stuff, and that's a fantastic book. It's a very, very science heavy. So if you're coming from the science world, that is a good book to get you going. It's a good book to let you see that we don't know that much. With the things that we think that we know about the universe are very, very sketchy, very flimsy. So that's what those books are really good for. And I was going to say, hands down, the most life-changing book I ever read, as far as initiating me on this path, was this one. It's called The Fabric of Reality by David Deutche. And for those of you who are familiar, David Deutche is considered the godfather of quantum computing. He was the guy that first proposed it, and he was instrumental in building these things and making them come to fruition. So he's a very, very brilliant guy, and he was describing how computers could take advantage of the multiverse and how it worked. But there was something about his way of explaining multiverse theory that was very, very elegant, and it guided a very cynical mind to a place of it guided a very cynical mind into the great mystery of multiverse theory. And for the first time ever, I started to consider the possibility that the cosmos wasn't real at all, that in fact it was just an expression of the mind, that the mind is all there is. And that was the book that brought me to that place. My mind was completely blown with all that. Really, really crazy. Hang on, let me get some water. Oh, we got a nice crowd in here. 34 people? Awesome. I love it. I love when you guys show up. Thank you guys very much. And by the way, if you guys have any more questions, drop them in here and I'll read them. Put them in all capital letters and I'll go through them. I have a lot to go through, so I'm just going to go through really fast if I can. So, yeah, that book brought me to the possibility of a mental universe, and that was pretty mind-blowing. That was what got me into a place of really, really learning a lot about multiverse theory. I started reading a lot of books about it. Where Does Mind End? Singularity. I started learning about the Simulacrum. It's another great book here. If you guys into the Matrix, this book, Simulacra and Simulation. And Jean Baudrillard, he's a French philosopher, but very, 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 very fascinating book. So this was I watched the movie The Matrix at about the same time. This is like 1999. So I was reading these books about multiverse theory. Then The Matrix came out, and I was like, oh my God, this is like exactly what's going on. So that's when I read this book, and this gets really, really heavy into the idea of what a matrix is and what a false reality is. And this is very, 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 very eye-opening to me too. So I had that, those books right there. I had written. I also read Hyperspace by Michio Kaku, and I had written. I had also read Holographic Universe by. Sorry, I forgot his name. Holographic Universe, famous book. So those books, and along with The Matrix, I was like, wow, I was really starting to see things in a different way. And that is when I started to write my first book, Becoming God. Here. I published this in 2005. And this is just really just a layman's way of distilling these very, very complicated books over here into something that, a musician language for people to understand. And I didn't have an intention of publishing this book when I wrote it. It was simply, I had a lot of parties at my house all the time. And I would get so bored with the conversations. The conversations were just very, very boring and a lot of drama-filled stuff. And again, this is where I get into the fact that what the music business did for me is it provided a very solitary life. Once I was an independent entrepreneur, I didn't have to answer to anybody. I didn't have to go to an office anymore. So I didn't have people around me so much. It was kind of like just me and my wife at the time. alone out in the country in our house, and we would have these huge parties. People come to the house on the weekends. It was kind of like the after party, if you will, to all the big club parties. And people would have conversations, and we would be talking. I mean, most people would just be caught up in the drama of being at work, and they'd be, this bitch did that, and that guy's a jerk, and blah blah blah, and this is what happened to me here. And I was kind of like, A, I can't relate with any of these conversations, and B, they're boring, and C, they're very, very negative, and it brings the whole high down of the party. So I thought that what I was learning about was very, very fascinating, and I thought it would be a good conversation starter. So I had written Becoming God. It was only, the first edition of it was about 95 pages, I think, and it was something I just printed out to give to my friends, just so we would have something to talk about. And that was the intention behind that. And it did more than that. The feedback that I got from friends it just blew my mind. People were just very, very enthralled with the idea and the concept, and thought it was mind-blowing. And it got to the point where there was a lot of people who would just come to my house, not to party, but just to continue this conversation. That they say that the conversation was haunting them the same way it was haunting. It was the only thing I wanted to talk about. I would often say it's the only thing that's relevant. So I had this sort of half-published Becoming God book, and I gave it out to a bunch of friends. And then I met a person who was a bona fide psychonaut, which means it's a person who does a lot of psychedelics, and in a way that is not to get high so much, but in more of a meditative sense, to dive into the nature of consciousness. And I had so I met this person through the book. It was a friend of a friend who passed the book on to somebody, and this person read it. And this person, I don't want to say names because I don't want to do anything, but the person who read it was blown away by the book and couldn't believe that I was able to say so much of what I was saying in this book, and having never tripped on psychedelics before. I was a music producer. I had rolled on ecstasy, lots of times. But I didn't really do any other drugs. I just did that, and I really kind of stayed away from that kind of stuff. But the person came and wanted to meet me, and was very, very insistent that I try some psychedelics. And the very first psychedelic I did was a psychedelic called 2CI. It's the number 2, capital C, dash, lowercase I. And it was so new and so illicit that it didn't even have a street name yet. It was just this chemical name. And because I was quite the nerd at the time, I didn't just take the drugs. I was, I have to research everything to the hilt. So I did a lot of research on this drug, tried to learn as much as I could about it, and was very, very fascinated by the potential of this drug. So I decided to take it, and it was completely life-changing and transformative, beyond words, far beyond anything that I had prepared myself for. And when that happened, the first couple of times that I did it, it was more of just complete being mesmerized and confusion, and trying to wrap my head around what was taking place, which is what happens when you do psychedelics. The veils drop. All the veils drop at once, which is why when you come off of psychedelics, it's impossible to describe what you're going through, because when you come down, the veils go back up, and you can't see it anymore. You can only see it while you're tripping. But the problem is, when you're tripping, it's hard to articulate things because you can't find the words. You can even say that you're cognitively there when you're tripping. You can put thoughts together, and you can have very, very deep ideas and introspection while you're tripping. But finding words is very difficult. And you have to think about the irony of that, because you've got this drug that kind of reveals the truth, but removes your ability to speak about it. So I find that very, very, very interesting. I also found it interesting, too, that this drug that I was taking was called 2CI. So it's kind of, I didn't realize this at the time of when I was first started taking it, but Years later, I would look back at this drug, and the fact that it was named after its clinical chemical name. But if you break the words down, think about it. It's 2CI. It's 2CI, the one inside here. And it was little things like that, these little clues, these little kind of weird things that I was kind of starting to see for the first time. And when the clues started to happen, these little moments where you're kind of going, man, what are the odds of that happening? What are the odds of this song playing at this time, right when I was having this thought? Or what are the odds of this thing happening? And it was just, for a person who was very, very rational and very rooted in science, it was very difficult for me to reconcile those things. And pretty early on, maybe the third time or fourth time doing 2CI, I had a spiritual experience. I don't know how else to say it. There are people over, and I got this. I started not feeling well. I didn't want to be at the party with everybody else. So I just kind of excused myself to a quiet part of my house, and I lay down on a couch where there was no one else around. And I just tried to fall asleep because my stomach was hurting really bad. And when I tried to fall asleep, suddenly there was an image that popped in my mind. And keep in mind that this drug is incredibly hallucinogenic. I mean, I wouldn't say that you see external hallucinations, but the crazy patterns in your mind are just almost indescribable. I put the picture of it on the cover of this book, and you're kind of seeing that kind of pattern when you do that drug, these fractal patterns and stuff. But there came a point where it turned into like a dream like of a thing, and I looked up into what I thought was looking up into the sky, and I saw this very famous painting, the famous painting of all the souls being taken up into heaven, kind of a thing. And it freaked me out in a huge way because I wasn't ready for that. And there was this overwhelming feeling of divine awe when that visual was happening. And it was a famous painting that I had seen as a Catholic a million times, but it was like, it was new to me. It was just hitting me in a different way, and I could definitely feel that there was a higher sense of power, call it a higher mind, call it angels, call it God, call it the devil if you think that's what it is. But it was trying to communicate something to me of a higher gnosis, and it was trying to distill information down to my then very narrow mind. And when that happened, everybody had to get out of my house. That was it. That was the end of the partying. That was the end of it. And that is when I started to become a true psychonaut. It became very, very much about getting in touch with what was happening. I very, very quickly realized how important this was. And yes, it took psychedelics to show me this, but it changed my life in a positive way, a very, very positive way. Now, some people might say, oh, that's the devil, it's demons, and that's what seduced you. And here's my thing about that. The psychedelics, which I've done thousands of times now, more than 1,000 times now, which is why I'm totally insane. But here are the results of me taking this drug has been totally falling in love with life, totally falling in love with other people, totally falling in love with the idea of becoming a better person and becoming more integral, becoming more compassionate, finding a divine spirit in myself when I was a complete atheist before this, seeing the value in prayer, seeing the value in meditation, obsessing over learning from teachers and reading these books, right? These are all the things that came as a result of psychedelics. So if it's the devil, it's making me a better person. So I don't really know how to process that. I can only tell you that it's making me feel like a better person and act like a better person. So that's all I can say about that. So the psychedelics were a huge part of my awakening. But here's the thing. What the psychedelics do is, and I'm gonna caution anybody out there who thinks that psychedelics is it. Oh, you just gotta take psychedelics and then you know everything. No, it doesn't work that way. You get what's called you get a glimpse. You get a glimpse of what the truth is. But like I said, trying to take that back down with you into life is very, very difficult. It's almost impossible. And for me, what happened was I was very, very fortunate and blessed that my wife at the time also found an enormous amount of value in taking that drug too. And between the two of us, we just realized that this was a very, very important thing to dive into. And she became a psychonaut with me and had some amazing spiritual experiences as well. So what happened was, basically what happened was, I was a musician and I didn't have many responsibilities. I could pretty much do whatever I wanted. Obviously I had to make music, but the way the music business is, especially at that time, I would be doing a lot of album work or single work. So I would get a project that would take me 3 or 4 months, and then that would pay my bills for the rest of the year, and there was a lot of kind of downtime in the meantime. So what else is there to do besides trip and explore this? So that is what I did. And people want to know how I could possibly have tripped more than 1,000 times. Well, when you're doing it several times a week, it adds up very, very quickly over a decade. So was that a responsible thing to do? I don't know. Was it a good thing to do? I don't know. Clearly, I wouldn't call myself a role model in that sense. But for me, it was beneficial. And I could tell you that for a lot of people, psychedelics is not the thing. There's a lot of people I know I would definitely not recommend psychedelics to. You have to have a really, really good sense of self, a good sense of being out of control. You have to be very, very comfortable with being out of control. And if you're uptight, if you're the uptight type, I don't recommend psychedelics. You're going to have a miserable time. I would say that unless you're getting a very, very deep, deep calling to do psychedelics, don't do it. If you're getting that calling, then you should do it. And realize that, Terrence McKenna has a great way of saying this. He says that unless you go into it afraid that you took too much, you didn't take enough. Because you have to overcome this boundary of fear for it to reveal itself to you. You have to personally move past the point of, am I safe, for it to reveal the truth. And I think that there's a lot of truth to that. All the times that I did the tripping experiences, very few times was it a spiritual experience. It was usually after I took chances and was probably, as you could say, irresponsible with that. And let me preface that by saying, as far as I know, no one's ever died from psychedelics. They may have died from making stupid decisions on psychedelics, but the drug itself is not going to do anything harming to you. So that's my stint on psychedelics. But what the psychedelics did for me was give me that sense of awe, give me that sense of wonder, to where I'm an Aries. My personality type is I tend to obsess with things, especially if I'm impressed by it. And I was very, very impressed by what those glimpses were, and became very, very obsessive about learning this. Part of it too is I wanted to finish my book. I felt like I had written something that was very, very profound. And part of writing a book is you have to do a lot of research and you have to learn a lot of things. And that was what I did. So I started devouring books. I had a lot of time on my hands, obviously, and I just started devouring books and going to retreats and listening to people talk. And from doing that, excuse me a second. From that obsessiveness, little nuggets of truth would drip in, and I would get a sense of a new nugget. I'd be like, ooh, and it would bring me a little closer to the truth, a little closer. So in the meantime, I'm still tripping too on a regular basis while I'm learning these things. And that's when things really started to change, because when I wasn't tripping, my mind was kind of going into these places of getting in touch with spirit, getting in touch with this multiverse. I was very, very stuck on the multiverse for many, many, many years, and I've since moved past that. But the multiverse was something that I was I couldn't move my consciousness beyond that for a long time. And learning from these spiritual teachers is what eventually broke me free of that. And now I see it without the multiverse altogether. The multiverse is just it's a concept, let's put it that way. The multiverse is a way to conceptualize spirit, if you will. It's when you try to think of the multiverse as a real, actual thing, that's when you get stuck. You have to completely separate yourself from what is real and what's out there. So among the teachers, I got into Eckhart Tolle. And if you guys don't know who Eckhart Tolle is, definitely I suggest you Google him and look him up. Now, he has a way of speaking that is very, very precise and very slow, and it turns people off if they're not familiar with this kind of stuff. And what you have to realize is that the reason he talks so slow and so precise is because he is remaining completely aware in the moment as he's speaking. So he's not allowing his ego to do the talking for him. He's in the state, and he speaks from the state of awareness. And once you understand that, you can kind of get through it with him. And anyway, very bright guy. He's written several books. I think this is his most famous book. I think he has another book called A New Earth, which is even better than this one. It kind of includes this book too, so you can just read that one. It's called A New Earth. Fantastic book. Another teacher I like a lot that really, really blew my mind. This was given to me by another musician who is also on this path. And this is Hazrat Kahn. He's a Sufi from the early 1900s. Early 20th century, I should say. This book is fantastic. The Mysticism of Sound and Music, which is not really about music. It's using music to describe the universe and to describe the nature of things. Because as I say all the time in this show, that it's toroidal. That's who you are. And the fundamental principles of the toroid is musical. Phi, it's all based on the principles of Phi, which is the Fibonacci, and the Fibonacci is extremely musical when we break it down, but that's a whole other podcast, so I'm not going to get too deep into that. But this book right here, whether you're a musician or not, fantastic read. Very, very beautifully said and eloquent in his teachings. And that was when I met a good friend of mine. His name's Mark Serto. Now, I'm gonna give you a little treat here. Mark is going to be on my show tomorrow. As a matter of fact, I'm going to interview him tomorrow for the Psychonauts podcast. Now, Mark is part of the Gateway Project at the Monroe Institute. So those of you who are in the know about binaural beats and about awakening through audio are very familiar with the Monroe Institute. The Monroe Institute was very, very famous, and still is famous, but was involved in a lot of things, almost everything we know about healing with sound and using sound to affect consciousness and binaural beats. All of that came from the Monroe Institute. And my friend Mark Serto was the chief engineer there. So he was the chief guy coming up with all of these different ideas. Worked with the CIA, worked with all kinds of things. Like the Gateway Project was all part of the remote viewing process used by the CIA. And he's going to get into all of that stuff on the next podcast. A longtime friend. He's been one of my best friends for forever. And he is incredibly aware, probably one of the most aware people I personally know, and a great storyteller. So I cannot wait to have him on here with you. But he started teaching me, and taking me into these little private one-on-one classes and started teaching me some things. And that is where a lot of it started to really come together, because I was with somebody who was aware, and I was able to do one-on-one, ask questions and get responses. And I have to tell you, there was a lot of things that he would talk about that didn't make sense to me then, but make sense to me now. He was the person who taught me how to step back. He was the first person to say, okay, this is your life, just take a step back. Just disengage from it and just identify from it. Which at the time, didn't make sense. It made sense sort of, but it didn't really click. And I think since all those years ago, since learning that, it's very, very easy for me to take a step back now. But at the first point of learning that, it didn't make sense to me. So when you hear me say take a step back and it's not clicking for you, don't get stressed out. It's fine. It's going to click eventually. Eventually, you're going to have enough hay straws to go. You'll be like, oh, that's what it means to take a step back. That's what it means. So Mark had 2 books that he recommended to me he thought that they were the most life-changing reads. The first was The Power of Myth by Joseph Campbell. The Power of Myth. And I talk about Joseph Campbell quite frequently on this show. A fantastic philosopher who's studied history, and he's mostly studied the myths from all cultures throughout history. And he found this pattern inside all of the most cherished myths. And he found that all of these myths follow this single story, the single pattern. And what makes it an amazing read is you start to realize that you are following the same pattern in life, that the hero's journey is your story, it's your pattern, it's your life. And this is why it's woven into all of the great myths over the centuries, because it's telling you the story of you. And that becomes very, very apparent as you read that book. And I would definitely say that was one of the most powerful books I've ever read, as far as that. So I highly recommend that. Another book that Mark recommended was A Course in Miracles, which is a fantastic book. I can't say that I've read all of this. I mean, it's a lot of pages. What is it, like 1,800 pages? But there's a lot of great nuggets in here, and I was going to read you this one passage here. And here it is right here. So it actually says in this book, I'm not going to read the whole passage, but it essentially says that if you understand this single passage here, you will be able to understand the entire book. And I'm going to read this little thing to you here now and just see how many of you get it just from the conversations we've had on this channel. It says, gosh, I don't have my glasses. Okay. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. I'm going to say that again. Nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. So if you understand that line right there, that basically sums up this entire book according to A Course in Miracles. And very, very deep. I love things that are succinct. I think anybody who can distill 1,800 pages of words into a single sentence that is very, very correct, that's the sign of a brilliant, brilliant mind. Being succinct. Not really what I practice on this show, but I need the watch time. I'm just kidding. What else? Are you guys into this? I hope you're into this, because these are the questions you guys have been asking me. And please, if you guys have questions in here, drop them in the chat. Put them in capital letters so I don't miss it. Okay. So another teacher who I really, really adore very, very, very much is Osho. He was a quote-unquote guru, and had a lot of followers here in America, and got into some trouble. I know there's a documentary on him on Netflix. You can watch the documentary if you like to, or not watch it. I don't think it reflects who he is very well. It was more about the scandals around him, and which I'd rather not get into. It has nothing to do with his teachings, but his teachings are absolutely brilliant. An amazing, amazing teacher. He's got hundreds and hundreds of videos on YouTube where you could just hear him talk. He has got a very, very thick accent, so he's kind of hard to understand sometimes, but you can get the gist of it, and if you have to watch it a couple times to totally get it, you do that. But amazing teacher. I'm also a fan of Sadhguru. Some of you guys know who Sadhguru is. He's probably the most famous spiritual teacher out of India at the moment. He speaks to millions millions of people at a time. When I saw him here in America, I did a retreat with him, and there was over 10,000 people there. And he's a very, very good teacher, great teacher. And yeah, I like him a lot. All right, so now, this book right here is going to be hands down the most important book of everything that I've read. But I do not recommend this book because you've been on this path for a while. This should not be your first good book out of the gate. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to understand it. It not that it reads difficult, but it's what it's talking about. On the surface appears to be one thing, but it's what's said in between the lines, and then you get the real sense of what the book is talking about. It's the best I can explain it. But that book is called The Kybalion. Now, unless you are really, really well acquainted with the eternal now, this book, it's not going to make any sense to you at all. It's just going to appear, it even says this in the book, that unless the mind is prepared, unless the mind is ready, this will appear as just words. And the entire meaning will be lost on you. So even though this is the most powerful book, it should be one of the last books you read. I would say the same about The Power of Myth as well. Probably the two most powerful books, but they should be read after you've been on this journey for quite some time. And let's see. Other great books that I recommend, Frederick Nietzsche, Beyond Good and Evil. Amazing. I would not recommend reading anything by Nietzsche unless you're over 35. Otherwise, you'll just get severely depressed and just say, what's it all for? But it's because he's kind of like the Kybalion in that unless you are able to read between the lines of what he's implying, it has a different message on the surface that it's really carrying, that the authors are really intending to send you on. So if the mind isn't ready, you're just going to miss it. So Nietzsche is amazing. Beyond Good and Evil and Thus Spoke Zarathustra is his other book that I really thought was amazing. And I got this new book, which I haven't read yet. I'm a huge fan of Carl Jung. Now, Carl Jung is one of the godfathers of psychology. Freud and Carl Jung are the two guys who basically invented psychology. And they had a slight disagreement about psychology, where Freud kind of thought that everything was a result of your relationship with your mother. And Carl Jung thought it was deeper than that. He thought that all of the information that every living being learns throughout life goes to a place called the Akasha field. I don't think he's ever called it the Akasha field, but would go to a place that becomes this exterior mind that we're all tapping into. And these are things that he was saying back in the early 1900s, and that made him clash with Freud in a huge way, to the point that there are now two schools of thought of psychology. There are Jungians, and there are people who are subscribed to the Freud's teachings. And if you're going to see a shrink, I highly recommend you see a shrink who follows the principles of Carl Jung, because some of you guys might feel compelled to air things out with a shrink as you awaken, because you're going to be opening wounds. And if you go to see a shrink who doesn't know about the spiritual nature of things, you could be guided in the wrong direction. That's all I want to say about that. It's kind of a tough one to talk about. So anyway, Carl Jung devoted his life to psychology, but then at the end of his life, he wrote this master book called The Red Book. It's this gigantic book here. And this book describes all of his psychedelic journeys and all of his experiences with spirituality and self-awareness. And it's very, very fascinating. It was a book that he had written, but it didn't publish it until after he was dead. He didn't was worried about the ridicule that it was going to cause in his career, but a lot of people think that it's the most important work he ever made. I have not read the book officially. It's a very expensive book. I've read compendium books to go to it, but I'm excited to finally get a chance to read it. So Carl Jung, great person to get involved with. And then as far as other teachers, I'm really too, I'm a huge fan of Alan Watts. Alan Watts is probably my favorite teacher of all the teachers. Alan Watts, he's got thousands of videos on YouTube. He's dead now, but in the 60s, he was a huge Zen teacher, teacher of satsang and Zen, and everything that I tell you on this show, he would totally subscribe to. Much of what I teach on this show are just distillations of what he was teaching. It's the same message. But he's much more eloquent than I am. He's got a beautiful voice, and I love going to sleep listening to him. I feel like it just puts me in that place. It's such a beautiful place for me to be in as I fall asleep. So I highly recommend that. He's wonderful for that. And another person I really follow is also dead now, but this is a preacher, actually, who his name is Neville Goddard, Goddard. First name is Neville. And some of you guys might be familiar with Neville. He's very, very famous now. At the time, he really wasn't as well known. But when I first heard about Neville Goddard is because I had written Becoming God, and I would get letters, and people would say, oh, you should check out this guy, Neville Goddard. And I was kind of like, yeah. And I would get like a second letter and then a third letter. I'm like, okay, I should probably check this guy out and see what it's about. So I put on one of his tapes on YouTube, and I started listening to it. And it was super, super evangelical, like just very, very like, instantly I was just like, oh, God, get me out of church. I don't want to hear this. And I only listened to about the first 5 minutes of what he was talking about. I turned it off. And I thought that was going to be the end of Neville for me. And then I started getting more letters, and people just kept saying, have you heard of Neville Goddard? Yeah, that what you're teaching is exactly what he's teaching. And I was like, maybe give this Neville guy another shot. So I did, and it blew my mind. It completely blew my mind. So I credit Neville more than anyone to awaken me to Christ consciousness. I was learning awareness through all these other teachers of self-awareness, and I was learning how to self-actualize. But Neville is the teacher who got me to fall in love with Christ again. And there were many, 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 many nights listening to Neville. He's got hundreds and hundreds of lectures on tape. I ordered all of his lectures. I have a whole collection of them. But almost all of them you can get for free on YouTube, so just search there. But I cannot tell you how many nights I would just listen to Neville just for hours at a time. And some of the most transcendental experiences of my life, not on psychedelics, moments where I was just completely in awe and in the wow of the mind of the universe and the mind of God, and really, really, where all this stuff was really clicking for me was through Neville's teachings. Maybe that was because I was brought up Catholic as a young kid. So even though I said I was an atheist, maybe there was some small part of me still holding out for God, so to speak. But whatever it was, I can tell you that there was many, many occasions in my nightly listens that I would just break down in tears. Absolute be just sobbing, tears of joy, tears of relief. Because a lot of what I'm talking about here sounds crazy, right? I mean, I guess all of you guys can relate how insane this conversation is. So I think a part of me was nervous about that maybe it's not true, or maybe I was just crazy for thinking these things. But what Neville did was to show me that this experience of non-dualism that I was having is exactly what Jesus was talking about. And when he teaches it to you this way, when he teaches you how to read the Bible, you can go in there and you can read it yourself, and you'll be able to get the same understanding out of it. And then, like I've said on this channel, the trick to reading the Bible is if you can read the Bible, especially the New Testament, read the lines in red, which are the sayings of Jesus. Read only the lines in red and read them in the first person singular. So you read the words of Jesus as if Jesus lives in your heart and is speaking directly to you. When you can have that kind of way of looking at the scripture, it's completely life-changing. Completely. Because here is this wild, crazy idea, and there it is printed in the holiest book in the world, spoken by the most famous man in the world for being holy. So when I was able to see that, there was just an unbelievable emotion of relief, of just relief is the only word I can give you. Really give you. Let's see. People ask me about Kabbalah, more into the mystical Kabbalah. This is Dion Fortune teaching Kabbalah. This is a heavy read. This is not a early beginner read. This is a read after you've been on this path for a while. But this is the true mystical Kabbalah. This is the real Kabbalah. This is not the Britney Spears, Madonna, I'm wearing a red string on my wrist Kabbalah. This is like, if you want to get into the mystical teachings of what Kabbalah really is, this is the book to read. Dion Fortune. And started getting into alchemy. I read several alchemy books. I found this one to be really, really good because it was just... it was more practical. This is a more practical book, and it didn't lean so much into the experiments of what alchemy is. You know, alchemy, people think that alchemy is about turning lead into gold, which is just a metaphor. You're turning yourself into gold. Alchemy is about refining the soul, refining the spirit, refining the self to purity, to purify yourself, refine yourself, just as you do turning base metals into gold. You're doing it to yourself. So part of learning about alchemy, and this book was really, really good. Her name's Catherine McCune. It's called On Becoming an Alchemist. But partly, as I read this book, I realized, as I got closer to finishing the book, is you start to realize that the alchemy in my life was happening automatically. All of the stages of alchemy I realized were already unfolding in me naturally. And I could say, oh, here I am. I'm at stage 4. Oh, no, I'm at stage 5 now. I'm at stage 6. I could see this roadmap, so to speak, of what was going to unfold for me. And part of those steps that hadn't unfolded for me when I was reading that book were terrifying at the idea. They were so bad. A lot of it was about coming clean, basically, coming clean with your story and facing truths, and you're having to face lies and really face the truth of who you are and what you've become. And there was just a big eye roll when I was reading that, and like, oh God, is this really going to happen? And man, it happened. And when I tell you that every step of the alchemy process is unfolded in my life, it's the truth, and it's still unfolding for me. But very, very fascinating stuff there. And that's about all I have here. I have another teacher I like a lot is Ram Dass, Ramdass, Ram Dass. And Ram Dass was originally Richard Alpert. He was the head of psychology at Harvard University. So this is no slouch. This is no intellectual slouch, okay? This is a real credible scientist. And Richard Alpert and Timothy Leary, you might have heard of them, they began what was called the Harvard psilocybin experiments, which was experiments on psychedelics as a scientific study at Harvard. It was very, very famous. It took place in the 60s. And it got both Timothy Leary and Richard Alpert fired from Harvard for doing this. And they had concluded that the psychedelics were creating a lot of spiritual experiences for people. It would seem to be a very regular thing. And they were both very, very fascinated by this. And after getting fired from Harvard, they devoted their entire lives to psychedelic research. And Richard Alpert noticed some similarities between the Buddhist Book of the Dead, or Tibetan Book of the Dead, and noticed these similarities between that book and the psychedelic experience. So he traveled to India to sit with the Maharishi over there and learn from him. And the first thing he did was he brought psychedelics to the Maharishi, and the very first day that he was there, the Maharishi took 5 hits of LSD, huge, gigantic hits of LSD, and Richard Alpert said that nothing happened to him. And that was when he knew he had found somebody who was really, really there, because the guy, nothing happened at all, and he said he should have been on the floor just losing it, but he was totally cool. And so Richard Alpert devoted his life to the Maharishi and lived at the commune, I guess, at the ashram there. And eventually his name was changed from Richard Alpert to Ram Das. So the Maharishi renamed him and told him he needed to go back and leave India, and he needed to go back to America to spread this teaching. And that is what he did. He went back to America and he wrote a lot of books and became a very famous lecturer. And a lot of his lectures are on YouTube. I highly recommend checking them out. His name is Ram Dass. And he wrote a book called Be Here Now, which is an amazing book. I don't have it here because it's one of the books I've given away to somebody. But that's a very, very interesting read, because it reads kind of like a comic book, so to speak. It's really a lot of, the entire book is just pictures that Ram had drawn while he was at the ashram, just pictures of his family and people and scenarios and what if. And it's really, really out there, and it forces the mind to think outside the box. You know, nothing is written in paragraph form. It's not typed. It's all just kind of scatterbrained, and it forces the mind to take in this very heavy information, because you kind of, your guard is down when you're reading that book. You feel like you're reading a child's book, and he kind of sneaks in these really, really heavy thoughts. So fantastic book. It's called Be Here Now. Ah, man, it's a lot, isn't it? Boy, we've been on here for an hour and 8 minutes, and I haven't even really got to the juicy stuff. Are you guys into this? I hope you're into this. These are the questions I keep getting, so I wanted to answer them all. Any new questions you guys want to ask? Anything new you want to stick in there? So, people ask about the ego death experience. They want to know about that experience. And that came by accident. It happened 2 times to me. I should say it happened 3 times if you don't include psychedelics. It happened very, very heavily without psychedelics, and it happened 2 more times on a smaller level without psychedelics, just simply meditating. But the first time it happened, I had accidentally taken an overdose of 2CI. I had taken a couple of hits of acid, more like 5 or 6 hits of acid, and I didn't feel like it was coming on. And famous story. This is the famous. Every great psychedelic story starts with, I didn't think I'd taken enough, so I went in to take more, and they all start off with that story. So I went back inside to take more, and I took it. It was fine. I was out on the front porch, and then my wife Lisa at the time, she comes out and she's like, "Who got into this? Did you go in and take more?" And I said, "Yes. I thought I needed a little bit more, so I went in there and took some more." And she said, "You took it from the uncut jar." And she calculated that I had taken over 100 hits. So that was pretty overwhelming. And I sat there for a minute, and we both kind of just went, wow, all right, well, she wasn't tripping at the time. She had taken a normal amount, and hers hadn't kicked in. And it takes about an hour and a half to kick in. So after I kind of just realized, okay, let me just get past the point of, there's no pumping the stomach or anything like this. The drug is so small, it's like tiny little grains of sand. So it's completely in your system seconds after taking it. So the idea of pumping the stomach or doing anything for you there's nothing they can do. So we went upstairs to the computer, we did some research, and determined that other people had taken almost as much as I had taken and lived through it. So I knew I was going to live through it. I knew I was probably going to be in for one hell of a ride. And I just buckled into ready to see what this thing was going to be. And I remember being in the hot tub with a few other people. We were all just kind of sitting on the ledge of the hot tub. We had our legs dangling in the water. And everything started to become very clear to me, that the veils were dropping, and I was starting to see synchronicities. All of these synchronicities that brought me to the present moment. And and as the synchronicity would come in, this moment of, wow, that's a really strange coincidence, and then I would realize through my teachings that no, it's not a coincidence, it's happening right now because it's only now. And I'd be like, wow, and then that coincidence would shatter. But then there was another coincidence, and another coincidence, and another coincidence, and I'd be like, no, that didn't happen, it's only now. Poof, I'd zap it out of here. And they would just keep coming in, and eventually, and Carl Sagan had the same experience. He describes it the same way. I would read about his experience years and years later, but the synchronicities just kept coming in like waves, and they are bigger and more mind-blowing every time they came in. And with each wave, there was just more clarity, and I started to laugh. I just started laughing uncontrollably, and I totally saw the truth of it all, that it was just now, forever. And as the synchronicities came in, I started to see synchronicities of the things that happened earlier that day. So these were not just like, this is not deja vu or these coincidental moments throughout my life, but these are like all the coincidences that happened that day. And as those coincidences were coming in, I started popping them and popping them and popping them. And as I popped them, I realized the present moment. I don't know how else to say it. There was just this realization that now is it. It's the only thing that exists. It's the only thing that ever exists. And that everything outside of the now is a complete illusion. And when that sank in, I freaked out. Like, I lost my shit. I'm not even gonna lie to you. I mean, I'm not even gonna try to be cool. Like, I lost it. I jumped up out of the hot tub, and the hot tub was off a ledge of a deck, so I, went about 10 feet over, landed into the garden with all these flowers and stuff, and I lived on a farmhouse, and I just started running across the yard. I mean, it was several acres, 3 acres, and I just started running. And as I was running as fast as I could, thinking, I don't know what I was thinking, I could run away from it. It was terrifying. It was the most terrifying experience of my life, bar none, hands down. Death. It felt like death. It was worse than death. It was just, there was nothing to hold on to. And I started running, thinking I could run away from it. And I started screaming out for people to come help me. And as I was running, the world just kind of started to fall apart, and I was starting to see, like, the world looked like you know how it looks when you stand between two mirrors? There's like this echoing of you. I started seeing this echo of who I was, and I would go boom, boom, boom to the next frame, the next frame, the next frame, and then after hitting a bunch of frames, I felt like I stumbled, and I fell through in between the two frames. And when I fell, there was no ground. There was no ground. I thought I was going to fall to the floor, but there was no floor. It didn't exist. There was no earth. There was nothing. It was just me floating, falling to my demise forever. I was just falling and falling and falling. And the feeling of falling triggers you to just scream. I just started screaming. I just was falling. For me, I felt like I was falling off of a cliff or a ledge, and I just started screaming and just waiting to hit the ground. And I didn't hit. I just kept falling and falling and falling and falling and falling, and I was screaming my head off. And eventually, everything around me was completely black, absolutely black. And when I looked down, I looked down when there was looking down, what felt like looking down, or the intuition that I was looking down. I saw what looked like a hurricane of light. It just looked like a hurricane, like a illuminated hurricane of light, and it was all swirling colors and swirling patterns. And I knew that down in that hurricane was my life. Like that's where I was. Like that's where life was. And I was moving away from it at a rapid rate. Like I was still falling, but I was falling up. I was falling up, and I could see what my reality was just going down below me, further and further and further away. And I just screamed and screamed and screamed. It felt like an eternity. It felt like an eternity until I couldn't scream anymore. Like there got to be a point where I just couldn't scream or cry anymore. And everything was black. There was just nothing. It was just complete emptiness. And there was an acute awareness and realization that I did not exist. That everything that I thought I was down in that hurricane of things. And even that was an illusion. That even all of that was just a temporary dream for the moment. And that there was no me. That there never was. It was just this. It was just the mind forever in empty, suspended in animation forever. Complete emptiness. So it was completely emptiness, even though there was an observer to comprehend the emptiness. The observer who I could say was me was fully aware that there was no me. That even that the idea of who I thought I was an illusion. And eventually, it seemed like forever, I found myself laying on the grass. Eventually, I don't remember hitting the ground. I just remember coming to what felt like a comatose sleep. I felt like I was asleep forever. And I felt the grass on the ground, and it was wet. It was the middle of the night. And my wife was there. She was kind of sitting next to me and holding me a little bit, and I could tell she was very, very worried and concerned. And she said I was laying in a pile of ants, which I don't even remember, but apparently I had ants crawling all over me and biting me. And as I started to come to, as I started to be able to see again, everything that I saw looked fake. It looked like a giant movie set. Like, even though I lived on a farmhouse, I'd look around and be like, okay, the trees look fake. The house looks like a toy house. The cars over there look fake. Everything looks fake. And I looked at my wife, and I looked in her eyes, and she had a doll's face, like a plastic doll. It was completely lifeless. There was joy there. There was joy that I was okay. There was concern there for me. But the face was empty. It was completely made of plastic, like looking at a child's doll. Black eyes and little tiny nose, and I think that was the scariest part, because seeing her that way, there was a very deep realization that this was not my wife. I had no wife. There was no story. There was nothing before. There was no reason for me to be here. That the idea of a wife was an illusion. It was just a story that didn't exist. And there was an acute realization that the person I knew as my wife, Lisa, came into fruition, came into beingness for the purpose of holding me, for the purpose of saving me in this situation of eternal falling, if that makes sense. And it was very, very, very real to me. I can't even articulate really how real it was that everything was fake and that everything was there just for me to feel good about being there. Like, there was this acute realization that the people in my life and the things in my life, all of it, was a mechanism of distraction to distract me from the eternal emptiness of where I just was. And this I say when God says something, that God creates dreams because it's something to do. That's where I get that from. It's complete emptiness forever. And there's only the mind in emptiness forever. So in order to let go of the emptiness, the mind goes into itself and creates dreams. And it was in this dream that I was existing right then and there. And that was my ego death experience. Again, the most terrifying experience of my life by a lot. I definitely would not want to go through that again. I did go through that again, but not intentionally. and yeah, it was absolutely terrifying. And it just showed me so much. I didn't really have a way to articulate the experience. I didn't have a way to process the experience. It took many, many, many years to say, what the hell was that? Like even though I could break down the events that took place, being able to grasp it as real took many, many, many years of processing and digesting what that was. The second time that this happened to me, it wasn't because of an overdose. It was me being a little bit too cavalier and on the psychedelics. And I think that I was trying to recreate that experience, or maybe come close to that experience without being all the way in there. And it was quite the opposite experience, in the sense that it was just it was information overload to the point of just seeing everything, understanding everything, to the point that you just say, no, I don't want anymore. Make it stop. Make it turn off. I can't download any more information. And it was terrible. It was a very, very terrible experience that I think I could have done something to harm myself in that state had I not been babysitted. So if you mess around with psychedelics, just make sure you have a babysitter, have someone there to hold your hand through it, especially if you're going to do very, very deep dives. It's very, 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 very important. And yeah, so that was that experience. And then the other times I had it, I wasn't on psychedelics. Like I said, they happened just through meditation, and they happened years later. And because I had already had the experience, and because I wasn't on psychedelics this other time doing it, I was able to handle it. It wasn't scary the third time at all. There was nothing scary about it. It was beautiful. It was like, oh, here I am. Here it is, and here's this realization, and everything is emptiness until I decide to go into a dream to make it into something. So again, these things are very, very, very hard to articulate, so I'm doing my best, but that's what that experience was. So collectively, between the books and the psychedelics and the constant learning and learning from as many different teachers as I possibly can, that is what brought me to the craziness that I'm in right now. And I'm sharing it with you guys. I don't claim to be a guru. I don't claim to be a spiritual anything. I'm just a person like you having an experience. I'm a spiritual being having a human experience, and a lot of this stuff has clicked for me, and I'm sharing it here with you. That's it. And I hope it resonates, but I also hope that you find many teachers to teach you this. Don't just rely on what I'm saying. I want you to hear other people talk about it like this, and that's when things are really going to change for you. I got a lot of action in the section here in the comments. This is awesome. Yes, some of you are saying that Rumi is really good. Yes, Rumi is another one of my favorite teachers. Rumi is a poet, and a beautifully self-aware poet, that all of his poems point to the same teaching that I'm pointing to. So read anything from Rumi. Rumi is a perfect coffee table book for every house, because you can read his poems in just a few moments, and just a single poem will bring you to the present moment. So I highly recommend Rumi a lot. Yes. Ben says Nietzsche. Yes, absolutely. Nietzsche is definitely. Krishnamurti. Oh yeah, Krishnamurti. He's another great teacher on YouTube. I really love a lot. I think his channel's called Sat Yoga, S-A-T Yoga, and he goes by the name Krishnamurti. He's an American teacher, and he lives in Costa Rica now, and he has got an ashram in Costa Rica, and he teaches the same things that you hear. And so he's another great teacher to listen to. Let's see. Any more things I wanted to cover? One more thing I wanted to cover too. I get a lot of questions too from people who are upset that I teach this. Surprisingly, I get some people on here who are very, very religious and are offended by the things that I say. It doesn't happen very often. I would say that 90% of the comments are very beautiful and very supportive and awesome, but I do get the occasional comment from someone like that. It's okay. Everyone's entitled to their own beliefs, and I'm not looking for confrontation. But I've also gotten messages from people who are on this path, and they get angry that I'm sharing this path, kind of giving away too much. They say that it's dangerous to learn this much. With great power comes great responsibility, and it's very, very easy to take what I'm saying and misuse this. And what I mean by that, when I say that nothing is real and to disengage from reality, some of you that might be struggling might want to take that and interpret that as, oh, then I should just kill myself then, or some terrible thing like that. And I wanted to address that here because that is not at all what I'm saying. And let me just tell you this thing that I've learned about suicide, because like I said, for the majority of my life, even the majority or a good part of my adult life, I was incredibly suicidal, very, very, very suicidal. So I know how hard that is. I know how painful that is. I know that I'm very familiar, and my heart goes out to you if you're suffering like that. But please heed this warning when I tell you this. And this is something I know for certain now from the experiences that I've had. But I will tell you for certain, if you kill yourself, you're just going to wake up in your life exactly as you are, except for all of the things that are making you upset, all of the things that are depressing you are going to be a lot louder this time. Because we're here to learn how to deal with these things. We're here to work on ourselves. We're here to build on our character. And if you take the easy shortcut out of just killing yourself because nothing is real, you're just going to wake up in another dream that looks just like this dream. And all of the things that are making you depressed are going to be that much louder. So don't kill yourself. Just know that this trip, this life, this thing that we're experiencing is a test of character. It's partly entertainment. And don't take it serious in the way that a child isn't playing cops and robbers serious. It's just a game. Everything is a game. And when you can see things as a game, it's easy to take them not quite so serious and let go a lot of the things that we think are so important. And anyway, it's important for me to just say that, so that's why I said that. So to be absolutely clear on that point there, that's pretty much it. And let's see, you guys have any more questions in here? Yes, Patrick. Life is incredibly, incredibly precious. So don't squander that. If you had any idea, if you knew how hard you worked to get into this dream, you wouldn't waste the energy. So just go through it. Whatever it is, just go through it. And if you can go through it with bravery and go through it with confidence, you're going to find that these things are going to all fix themselves. They'll just naturally fall away from you the minute you stop giving them attention. Thoughts become things. Awesome. You guys, there's so many people in here. Man, it's great. Right on. You guys are awesome. I'm just going through these things for a little bit here. You guys are great. So, yeah. What else here do I want to talk about? That's pretty much it. I would just say that dive into this. Devote, like I said before, devote yourself to this teaching, because there's nothing more important. Anything that you think is more important than this teaching is just you deluding yourself. All of it is about this teaching. And the world, the adversary, works very, very hard to distract us from this. Because that's the game. That's the game. And when you can start to work on yourself, be patient, love yourself, be patient with it, and know that it will come. The minute that you stop worrying about, when am I going to get this? That's when you're going to get it. The minute you stop focusing on the day that you become enlightened, the day that you give up on it, you're still going through the motions towards it, but you give up on the idea of enlightenment rescuing you. That's when it happens. And that's another part of enlightenment to talk about too. No one is coming to save you. Nobody. If there's one lesson you can take from any of this, it's to realize that no one is coming to save you. Nobody. You are the savior you've been looking for. It's you. And the quicker you can realize that there are no breaks, there are no help, there's no one coming, the minute you can, when you can totally accept that as truth and realize that the only thing that you're going to get that's positive out of life are the things that you bring to it, and stop looking for assistance on the outside, that's when the world is going to open up to you. It won't happen before that. And this is what the Buddha means by attachment. Right. Oh yes, here's more here. Ben's talking about, yes, the Book of Thoth, the Emerald Tablets is a primary read. I can't stress that one enough. You could read the Emerald Tablets in a single afternoon. It's like 100 pages. It's not that much, but it was written by Thoth, who was the builder of the pyramids. He's also the inventor of writing, the inventor of astronomy, and the inventor of astrology. So this is a very wise archetype who is the writer of a book called the Emerald Tablets. And they were discovered by the Greeks, and he was renamed in Hermetic wisdom, he was known as Hermes Trismegistus. He was the Greek god of Hermes and Thoth are the same archetype, the same person. And his book, The Emerald Tablets, is very, very brilliant, very, very brilliant. I highly recommend that book for sure. Yes. The Bhagavad Gita, yes, absolutely, another great book. Really, really, really good. And don't be afraid of the Bible too. When you can learn how to read the Bible with fresh eyes, like the way I'm telling you, I was a hardcore atheist, so I did not want to hear about Jesus Christ at all, but now I love learning about that stuff. I love seeing the reinforcement of these ideas in the holiest book in the world. There's great comfort there. I can't really describe it more than that, but just to say there's great, great comfort that comes from that. And if there's not any more questions in here, I'm going to dip out. Yes, you should listen to the Kybalion and also read it, because you're going to process it two different ways. But listening was the first way that I took it in, and it blew my mind. As I was taking it in for the first time, the Kybalion, I had been on this path for quite a long time, and instantly I recognized the Kybalion as the Holy Grail, so to speak, of what spirituality was. I mean, the Holy Grail is the chalice of the heart, but if there was one book that was like the thing that sewed it all together, the Kybalion is it. Just don't read it too early. If you read it too early, you won't get it, and then you'll just be mad at it, so it won't do any good for you. Right on. questions. A lot of people ask about the transgender thing. I don't really talk about the transgender stuff on here because I'm not a transgender channel. So it's really in my opinion, it's the least interesting thing about me, which is why I don't really talk about it a lot. It's not because I'm ashamed of it or anything like that. I'm happy to talk about it. But I think that what I'm talking about is more interesting than that. So if you want to learn about that stuff, check out a trans channel, but it's not really my thing. But I will come on here and talk about being trans in the context of spiritual awakening. I think there's a lot there that I could probably talk about, but I don't want to make that like the focus of this channel. And yeah, that's pretty much it. So my suggestion to all of you is to find time for yourself to disengage from reality as much as you possibly can. Again, if there's anything that aided in my awakening more than anything else, was the disengagement from culture. It's just, and I know that's hard for a lot of you. If you go to work every day and you work in an office and there's this idiot at the water cooler and this person's doing fantasy football and this guy's doing, I get it. It's going to be very, very hard to do that when you're surrounded by the unaware. But you've got to find time for yourself to do that. You know, on the weekends, instead of watching football, give them bread and circus, you know, go for a walk in the park and use your walk as meditation. You know, you don't have to sit still to be meditating. Just go for a walk without your phone, without other people, without on a goal to catch fish or to hunt. Just go for a walk for the sake of taking it all in and diving into your mind and thinking and working on yourself. Working on yourself, taking the time to work on yourself, on these things, this is the most important thing that you can do by a lot. And you're going to find that the more that you can master this, the more all of the things that you want in life are just going to happen all by themselves. All these things that you think that you're working towards, whether you want to be a millionaire or you want to be famous or you want to have lots of kids or whatever your dream is, you want to be a famous artist, whatever the thing is that drives you in life and that frustrates you, just know that it's going to come automatically to you if you devote yourself to spirit. If you just let go of trying to get that in the world and just focus on making yourself right, you'll find that you will attract these things. Instead of having to go out and get it, you'll start attracting these things to you, and it'll arrive like magic, because it is magic, and that's what you're performing. The law of attraction is very real. You have to become the person you want to be, fully. If that means lying to yourself, lie to yourself. And watch what you say. Words are very, very powerful. Whatever it is that you're saying, make sure that you're being mindful of how you speak. Abracadabra literally translates as I create what I speak. That's what the word means. Because every careless word you utter is going to manifest eventually. So be very, very mindful of the words that you use to talk. It's very, very important. Catch yourself when you're berating yourself. Catch yourself when you're telling yourself, oh, I don't have any money, or I'm broke, or I'm ugly, or I haven't. Catch yourself. Immediately make the correction. And speak into existence what you want out of life. Speak about it as if it's already happening. You know, all the things I have in my life that, you know, like I said, people think it's because of the gold record stuff. It has nothing to do with the peace that I have here. Nothing at all. All that came from this gnosis of what I'm telling you guys here. And if you trust yourself, and you trust yourself enough to dive in completely into this, it will do the same for you. And greater works than these will you do. Yes, it's very true. Okay, wow, this was a super long one. I went way over longer than I wanted to go, but we're an hour and 41 minutes into this. And I thank you guys very much for hanging out with me and listening to this this long story. I hope it was beneficial to you. I hope you guys got something out of it. And I'm going to be here every Sunday doing these things live. And then during the week, I'm going to release like edited versions of these Sunday night talks. So if you missed the live, just know that it will come out again as an edited version. So just look for that. And that's it. Thank you guys very, very much. I love you guys very, very much. Wow, we have almost 60 people in here. You guys are awesome. It's awesome. I love you guys. Have a beautiful, beautiful evening. And I'll see you guys soon. Take care.